Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Be Bold America. Our program today is How California Works, Building Democracy in the Golden State, Part 1. Why is this program a Part 1? As the mayor of Santa Cruz, Fred Keeley, stated, wishing that things worked one way or another is not the same as knowing how things work. How do we really get to know something? It is to study it. So getting to know our state of California and how we may participate and make a real difference will take more than one interview. It will take a short podcast series. The amazing book written by Jonathan Vankin titled How California Works, Building Democracy in the Golden State is information I wish I had been taught in high school. It shares true stories about how California is leading the world toward a better future, from protecting women's and voters' rights to building a sustainable energy infrastructure. These true stories are not naive or full of starry-eyed optimism. The book, How California Works, acknowledges that many Californians are confronting a myriad of crises. Yet, individuals and organizations throughout California, maybe imperfectly, are making our state better, fairer, and a safer place. How are they doing it? The word citizen is a verb. We have big things to do. Our bold interview guest today is Jonathan Vankin. Jonathan is a senior writer for California Local and award-winning journalist whose writing has appeared in such publications as the New York Times Magazine, Wired, Salon, LA Weekly, and many others. Jonathan is also the author of 4 nonfiction books, including Conspiracies, Cover-Ups, and Crimes, the first comprehensive journalistic investigation of America's conspiracy theory underground, foreshadowing the current state of socio-political affairs by 2 decades, and Close to Zero, a full account of Donald Trump's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Jonathan Vankin has also written comic books, TV screenplays, and even the book for a hit off-Broadway musical, Forever Dusty, about the great British pop star Dusty Springfield. He has made numerous media appearances on such networks as CNN, MSNBC, CNBC, Fox, the BBC, and the CBC, as well as numerous podcasts and hundreds of radio stations. Welcome to Be Bold America, Jonathan.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk about this stuff.
Well, it is my pleasure being a fourth-generation Californian. This is a topic I'm really interested in. Jonathan, I'm so impressed with your work. We've heard the term Renaissance man, but in my mind, you're a Renaissance author.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think I might even be coining a new phrase there. I've never heard it before. But in my view, you're a Renaissance author who's written from conspiracies, cover-ups, and crimes to how the 5th largest economy in the world works, to writing the book for an off-Broadway play, Forever Dusty, to writing a graphic novel titled The Big Book of Bad. Even that's not a complete listing of your diverse works. And now you will be doing at least a 3-part series, maybe 4, we'll see, with me on How California Works, returning to the show on November 17th and December 1st to discuss more. Thank you, Jonathan.
Well, thank you once again.
Jonathan, to start, tell us why every Californian needs to know this material. Why do we need to know how our state works? What's in it for us?
Well, I mean, there's that very old expression, cliche, but true, that knowledge is power. And we often make assumptions about things in our government, and and I think a lot of people see the government as something separate from themselves, something that doesn't necessarily affect their lives until they have to, pay their taxes or until they, have an encounter with law enforcement or something. But really, what I found in doing all this research for this book was that there's really no aspect of your daily life in which your government, and in this case the California state government is mainly what I'm writing about in this book, obviously, and county and local governments, but in particular state, there's really no aspect of your daily life that isn't affected by the workings of the government and by government policy. And pretty much everything that you encounter on a daily basis, whether it's you tripped over in the sidewalk, there's a crack in the sidewalk, or a tree the branch of the tree is on your house from the street. It's like all these little things are all ultimately the results of a government policy, and the government policies are created by people, elected officials, appointed officials, policies that have been written or in place for decades, or even, in this case, maybe more than a century. I mean, there's just so much there that we need to understand in order to empower ourselves to hopefully make changes that will improve our lives and improve the state of our state. So I think that's why this material is really important, and why I wish that people had more access to it. And the whole purpose in writing this book was to try to make it easy and hopefully somewhat entertaining to read about this stuff and find out about it. So I always have had a great sense of curiosity about things, as you can tell by my diverse career.
Being a Renaissance author. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm just curious about a lot of things. So I like to write about a lot of different things. And, I just working for California Local, I just have been very curious about how California works. Like what are the mechanisms? What are the policies? What are the things that affect us on a daily basis? And that's really what this book is about, whether it's about, mosquitoes. I mean, usually you go outside, you get bit by a mosquito, you don't really even think about it. But there are government entities called mosquito control districts that help protect you from mosquitoes. Or maybe if they're not working right, you have too many mosquitoes. I mean, things like that. So, even the littlest things like that are really embedded in the structure of how the state works.
Well, one of my goals for this How California Works podcast series, is I'm a policy wonk. So, I love this kind of stuff. I'm a political scientist, so I've always been interested in how government works and how people can be part of it. But one of my goals is to make policy sexy. I mean, for example, infrastructure. The word infrastructure is boring, but the results are not. And we all know that once something is built, the people come out for those ribbon cuttings. That is not boring. So I just want people to maybe catch our excitement about policy and how it affects their daily lives. And you start with the first part of your book is the editor's note, and you had 2 editors that began your book. Who are they, and what key points do they have, and what do they mean, citizen as a verb?
I think the first one, if I'm remembering right here, was, did Chris Nicholson write one? I believe he did.
Well, you have in your editors, it was Sharon Street and Eric Johnson. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Chris might have written the end of it. Chris was the owner of California Local. But Eric Johnson was the editor of California Local, and Sharon is the sort of executive editor or managing editor, I guess. One of those was her title. And I think it's the whole theme of the California Local is also a website, a news site, and the whole theme of the site and ultimately of the book was that being a citizening, I guess you want to say.
We're changing a noun into a verb. Mm-hmm. So
exactly.
citizening.
Well, the idea is that it's an active process. Like we're all citizens. You're born in the United States. You live in California for however long, or you're a citizen. But that's different than being a citizen and actively exercising your rights and your responsibilities and your privileges to affect how the state and how your city and how your county functions. So, and hopefully to improve it. So that's really why citizen is a verb. It's like you can go out there and be a citizen. You can do things that will bring about improvements. Sometimes big improvements, sometimes just small incremental improvements. I feel sort of like in the recent political climate, the word incremental has gotten a bad name. Like somehow it was wrong to be in favor of incremental improvements, but they have to happen. I mean, not everything happens. I have a chapter in this book about single payer healthcare. Right, it's sort of in the middle of the book. Maybe that's one we'll get to in one of the later episodes of this.
We will.
But but just to briefly, I think it's a really interesting policy. I think, but it would be a massive change to suddenly change our entire healthcare system. So sometimes you can't do these massive changes. You have to try to do things on what you'd call an incremental basis. And there's no choice. And that's how you make improvements. And sometimes those incremental improvements over a period of time will add up to revolutionary improvements. So I think all of those things are part of citizening, being a citizen, in ways that you can affect in big or small ways your environment that you live in.
Well, I think it's moving citizen from being a noun. We all, as you said, we're all citizens. We're living in California, we're citizens, but it can be passive. We can just go on with our lives and be passive at that. It's really turning citizen to a verb is really turning people into becoming civically engaged.
Exactly.
Where the website californialocal.com talks about the civic engagement engine. And, the sexy part of this is that when you become engaged, you meet some really great people. You get a feeling of meaning in your life, a sense of meaning. And instead of getting up, going out to your job, coming back and wondering what it's all about, this is what it's all about. Getting out there, whatever your passion is, gun safety, child care, whatever an issue is, that passion drives you to meet new people and to do exciting things, right?
Absolutely. And I think, I think sometimes people get overwhelmed by the idea of participating in what they would call politics. But it doesn't have to be overwhelming. I think, almost anything you can do. It's just talking to people, talking to your friends. I'm not the world's biggest fan of social media, but posting things on social media, as long as you can sort of make it rational and factual.
Factual,
and
yes.
They're true. You can affect how people think and see things. And you can start debates and discussions. And that's where everything starts. It's with, like I said earlier, it's like the knowledge is power. So you have to start with knowledge, knowing what's actually out there, and then you can talk about it, and then you can figure out ways to change it.
And you can be engaged. And this is a good right, and this is a good segue to the foreword, because the foreword's titled Truth versus Cynicism. And so our very own Santa Cruz mayor wrote this foreword for you, Fred Keeley. So how did you connect with Fred and talk to us about truth versus cynicism? And I guess it's cynicism versus skepticism, too.
Yeah, well, with Fred Keeley, that really came through Eric, who's the as I just mentioned, the chief editor or editor-in-chief
and co-founder of California Local.
Yeah, California and co-founder of it. He has that connection. He's very. I'm down here in Southern California. I'm in Los Angeles. So you're talking to me right now. So, but Eric is up north, and he's very integrated with the whole political scene up there. So he knew Mr. Keeley and talked him into doing this for us, which was great. I love it, and I think his foreword is fantastic. Yeah, the whole idea of cynicism, skepticism, or whatever. I think. One of the reasons that I wanted to do this book and put all these pieces together in a book was to try to do my small part to combat that, because it's so easy. And it really, I think, comes from a feeling of overwhelm that people have, because things can seem so complex.
Yes.
Politics, policy. Most people know very little about policy, and the word itself sounds, off-putting, I think. Mm-hmm. But like I was saying earlier, these things affect our lives. So it's easy to get overwhelmed by them and become cynical. Like somehow, well, it's all, these politicians are all just lining their pockets, or they're all, no one looks out for me, the little guy, the middle class guy. It's like, it's not that simple. All these things, policies are often very well intentioned, even when they don't work the way they're supposed to. A lot of these things are intended to make the state run more smoothly, more efficiently, to serve people better, and make the state more livable and a better place for everybody.
Well, now's a good time to take a break. Let me to get to truth and cynicism a little bit more after the break. So you are listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7, 89.5, and 89.7 FM, serving the California coast. Many voices, one station. Listen globally online from the KSQD.org website. Our topic today is How California Works, and our bold guest is Jonathan Vankin. Jonathan is a senior writer for California Local, and he is an award-winning journalist whose writing has appeared in such publications as the New York Times Magazine, Wired, Salon, LA Weekly, and many others. He is the author of several books, the latest of which is How California Works, Building Democracy in the Golden State. Learn more about Jonathan Vankin at jonathanvankin.net. Jonathan is spelled Jonathan, and Vankin is VANKIN.net. And read more about California at californialocal.com. Then click on Monterey County. I'm your host, Jill Cody.
Did you know that 6 corporations own 90% of the media in the United States? Isn't it about time we own some too? KSQD 90.7 FM, your community radio station, your voice, your concerns. Go to www.ksqd.org to get involved and support locally owned grassroots community media. K-Squid, KSQD FM.
Hello, K-Squid listeners. I'm Tom Hartman, and each weekday at 4 p.m., I bring you a different perspective on the news than you're likely to hear on most media outlets. Please join me on KSQD, Santa Cruz, your ink spot on the dial for the Tom Hartman program, heard now for the first time ever in the Monterey Bay Area at 90.7 FM, weekdays at 4 p.m. That's progressive talking conversation with me, Tom Hartman, weekdays at 4 p.m. on KSQD 90.7 FM. Tag, you're it.
We're back. Would you like a friend to hear this interview on how California works and the upcoming series on the topic? Be Bold America is available as a podcast on Apple, Spotify, Podcast Addict, Downcast, Overcast, and YouTube. Subscribe for free or listen to the show at Be Bold America's homepage on the KSQD.org website. Now, Jonathan, I just want to stay a little bit longer on the foreword, truth versus cynicism, because I took, actually as a facilitator in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People many years ago and trained many people. And one thing that Dr. Stephen Covey said was cynicism was a wound of the heart. And I think that people somehow get burnt or disappointed somewhere along the line, attending a school board meeting and something doesn't go their way. And they get so invested in it and don't really bounce back, but get a little wounded by that, and I might not want to participate anymore. So I think Fred talking about truth and cynicism and cynicism versus skepticism is very important. Can you expand on that?
Sure. I mean, I think what you say is correct. I think we do have a tendency to feel hurt and wounded by things that we don't fully understand, and things that, frankly, sometimes are quite unfair. I mean, I remember an experience I had once. I used to live up there in the north part of the state in San Jose, and I remember one time going to a planning commission meeting because I was living downtown San Jose, and this giant nightclub was supposed to go in right next door, and I knew it would make a lot of noise, and I knew it would not be good. And I went and I spoke as a citizen to the planning commission, and I thought I made a really good point, a really good argument for why this thing should not go up and why it was probably going to fail anyway, which it eventually did rather quickly. I was prescient about that.
Yes.
And I, it was one of those things where I felt I had them, and I had them sort of agreeing with me. And then as soon as I was done, the guy who was proposing to develop the place jumped up, even though the meeting was supposed to have been over, and spoke again, and then they took a vote, and they totally approved the place. So, and I walked away pretty frustrated, I walked away thinking, like, this does seem a little bit rigged. But, and maybe it really was. I really have no idea what went on behind the scenes. But I can see where, coming out of an experience like that, you could feel very disillusioned and very hurt and very upset. And I think there's been a lot of that recently, too, where you get people, a lot of voters who are voting maybe for the first time or the second time, their candidate doesn't win, even though they think that person is, the greatest thing ever and has policies that everybody should love, but still doesn't win. And they get very upset. And they decide, well, the system must be against us. It's all against us. So, and I think that's where cynicism really grows. The sense of disillusionment that somehow nothing can really work in your favor.
And not being able to dust ourselves off and get going again. That's another thing about working and living within governments, city, county, state, is that you're not going to win every one of them, but you dust yourself off and get going again and fight that cynicism.
Yeah, it can feel very disempowering, but you have to tell yourself that it's only one thing that happened, and you still do have the power. You still have some power, and you can continue to use it. And I think in a way, it's like we're almost structured. The system that we have, in some ways, is structured to make us feel disempowered. In a way, I think you get these myths sometimes, like myths that have maybe some basis in reality. People think, oh, all the politicians are the same, both parties are the same, they're all corrupt. Well, what does that do? What does that do for you to believe that? It just makes you feel helpless and overwhelmed and disempowered and cynical. And when you're cynical like that, you have no power and you're not inclined to try to contribute and try to make things better. So I think we should stick to the truth, medium truth and cynicism, and try to learn about what really happens. And why, when things don't go our way, why did it not go our way? What can we do to fix it? What can we do to maybe help it go our way next time? And to do that, you need to know what's going on. You need to know, what a planning commission is, what it does, that type of thing.
Maybe even talk to the staff beforehand and get a better handle of the forces. Right. And,
exactly.
And
there's...
Mayor Keeley also talked about the creation of California Foreword. We're just, this is right on topic in the book, in the line here in the foreword. It says, restoring faith in the political redistricting process presented a major challenge. She's talking about redistricting, but the creation of California Foreword is a project spearheaded by a handful of large nonprofit California foundations that paved the way. So here's an example of California Citizens Redistricting Commission. I don't even know if people understand what that did and how that moved our democracy forward.
Yeah. But there's another thing where, if you don't understand it, it can, again, feel very disempowering. The whole redistricting thing, the idea that, these districts can be drawn for congressional districts, state representative districts, that sort of thing, where your vote doesn't necessarily matter if you don't sort of agree with the majority in your district, and because the districts are drawn in such a way that there can really only be one outcome. We have to fix that, and groups like that have taken big steps to fix it. That's just one more thing where people actually taking a role and being active citizens, I think, helps. When you know how it works, you can try to change it.
Right. Again, it's understanding the system you're living within, working within. Towards the end of this foreword, Mayor Keeley talks about knowing the history of land use and the significant movement of power from city halls to the Capitol building. That struck me because I used to work for the city of San Jose as a senior manager. And I remember that we had, when Governor Brown, he closed the redevelopment agencies and took that power away from the city and brought it back to the Capitol. Do you have anything more to add on that? Because I think I really experienced that in San Jose, probably still suffering a bit.
Yeah, well, when I was in San Jose and I was working for a newspaper there called Metro, one of the main things we would cover was the redevelopment agency. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we covered the redevelopment agency a lot. This was obviously prior to 2012, and how it affected the city. And they did. The redevelopment agency did reshape, especially the downtown area of that city, as it did in many, many cities. So, I think that taking that local control away, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I think the redevelopment agencies, I think there was a potential for abuse there. I'm not saying there was necessarily abuse, and not necessarily in San Jose, but I think the potential was there. And I definitely have a chapter in the book about joint powers authorities, and it was fairly common, of course, in those days for city governments to form joint powers authorities, JPAs, with their own redevelopment agency, which was sort of a way of skirting voter approval. When usually voters have to approve things like bond issues and taking on debt. And JPAs, they don't. So when cities would then form JPAs with their own redevelopment agencies, they kind of got around all that. And the potential for abuse was definitely there, and the potential for inefficiencies and for maybe taking on too much debt or wasting money and that sort of thing was there because there just wasn't the public accountability. So at the same time, it's like, yeah, I think, for the state to just assume those responsibilities, of course, is taking away local control. And you want local control because each city has its own character, and the redevelopment of any city should fit with the history and the character of that city, ideally. And, if you centralize it in Sacramento, it's going to be a little hard to do that throughout the state. So, but at the same time, I think, the redevelopment agencies needed some sort of check on their power. So I'm not sure that was the ideal one. But for me, I saw it as kind of a two-edged sword.
I could have had the experience of building Cynicism there because I saw the redevelopment agency really put the city of San Jose on the map, building a Fairmont hotel, and P.F. Chang's came downtown, and the theater came downtown. I lived 16 years in downtown San Jose in District 3, and I saw the vibrancy that the redevelopment agency created. And then when Governor Brown closed them down, and I started seeing that, P.F. Chang's left, the movie theater, the AMC, left at midnight one night, boxed everything up and took everything out of the theater and snuck out of town. On the other hand, I knew that Governor Brown needed to balance a state budget at that time. Yep. The state was in the red significantly. So, I understood both sides, where it could have been seeing my city that I worked so hard for 15 years in to build myself, take a downturn. Yeah, I had to fight that cynicism myself, but I understood. I knew what the governor was doing. So let's take a break right now before we go to the introduction. You are listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7, 89.5, and 89.7 FM, serving the California Central Coast. Many voices, one station. Listen globally online from the KSQD.org website. We are interviewing Jonathan Vankin, who is the author of 4 nonfiction books in addition to How California Works, including Conspiracy, Cover-Ups, and Crimes, which is the first comprehensive journalistic investigation of America's conspiracy theory underground, foreshadowing the current state of socio-political affairs by 2 decades, and Close to Zero, a full account of Donald Trump's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Learn more about Jonathan Vankin at jonathanvankin.net. That's JONATHANVANKIN.net. And read more about our state of California at californialocal.com. Then click on the Monterey County. I'm your host, Jill Cody, and we'll be right...
It's time for America to go back to the future. The future of true greatness created by people united to build a strong nation for the common good. From the start of our United States, Americans have backed leaders who dared to do big public projects. Jefferson, Lincoln, TR, FDR, Truman, Ike, JFK, and LBJ all dared to achieve bold goals. It's only since Ronald Reagan's government is evil demagoguery that our presidents and lawmakers shrivel to no-can-do mediocrities, unwilling even to try tackling America's big needs or invest in our people's unlimited possibilities. Their failure is why our nation's infrastructure, once world-class, has deteriorated to an embarrassing 16th in the world. It's hard to muster any national pride in chanting, "We're number 16." But surprise, here comes Joe, a lifelong go-slow Democrat, unexpectedly proposing a get-serious, roll-up-our-sleeves $2 trillion package of investments to modernize and extend America's collapsing infrastructure. In addition to roads, bridges, and dams, it gives a long overdue boost to such needs as rural high-speed broadband and providing affordable child care facilities, all geared to creating good union jobs and lifting local economies. Even more transformative is Biden's Back to the Future method of paying for this Rebuild America agenda by returning to progressive taxation. Instead of the same old no-tax, laissez-faire extremism that Washington has practiced for 40 years, Biden will at long last demand that multinational corporate behemoths stop dodging their tax obligations to America. It's the same fair tax policy that funded our nation's real needs in the past, while also increasing productivity and raising living standards for millions of working families. This is Jim Hightower saying, let's do it again. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
We're back. Our topic today is How California Works, and our bold guest is Jonathan Venkin. And I stepped on poor Jim Hightower's commentary there. You know, this is a time when I remind people that this is live radio, and sometimes I get things wrong in my rundown, so I have to fix something here. Anyway, back to you, Jonathan. The introduction. I think you wrote that, right? The introduction part, moving on to that? Yes. So let me see. I have the book here, and we might hear paper shuffling because we're looking at the book. But you wrote, Welcome to California, the most American state. Why did you title your introduction that way?
Well, I mean, the thesis there is that there's no state that reflects America like California. I mean, demographically, we're extremely similar to the country as a whole. Obviously, we have the fifth largest economy in the world, really probably the largest single state economy in the United States, and there's so many other ways in which we influence. I think one of the quotes I have in here is from University of Southern California sociologist named Manuel Pastor, who said, California is America, only sooner.
I underlined that quote too. Yes.
Yeah, I think that really summed it up. It's like you can look at what's happening in California, and it's often a precursor to what the national trends are going to be, because California is such an American state, and in the other ways too. I mean, I think of all the many industries that are such a huge part of our economy in California. The biggest one, but it's a pretty big one, but probably the one that's most associated with California, at least Southern California, is Hollywood. And the product that comes out of Hollywood are their stories, sort of dreams and visions that shape how we see ourselves in this country. I mean, I think there's very few forces that are as powerful as entertainment, film and TV, and music to some extent, that shape of the American self-image. And that comes out of California. And that's not an accident. And, of course, technology up in Northern California primarily, though down here as well. Up in Northern California, you have Silicon Valley. And that's the place that connects America with itself and with the rest of the world, because that was where the internet was essentially created, and that's where it's been developed, and that's where so much of the technology that we've come to rely on
our chips
to communicate with each other, everything
chips
has come out of California there. So, it's almost like California is the basis of the whole country at this point. And I know it's become sort of fashionable throughout the rest of the country, and even in California too, a little bit, to kind of put California down and talk about there's people are leaving the state and it's so liberal and all this crazy stuff. But you cannot argue with the fact that that without this state, I don't really even think we have a country, at least not the way we know it. I mean, just our agriculture alone. I have a whole chapter about agriculture, California agriculture, in this book, and I sort of try to figure out what the American diet would be like if California agriculture suddenly disappeared. And it wouldn't be the same, that's for sure.
Right here, Salinas is the salad bowl of the country. And you did write in the introduction that the reality is without California, America would be a very different country.
It would be a very, very different country. I don't think we'd even recognize it. So I think that's why I started the book that way. And it was also sort of a way to invite people in to the book if maybe you're not in California and you want to read, like, why am I reading a book about California if I don't live in California? Well, it's really a book ultimately about America, about the country. And California just reflects the country, and maybe reflects isn't even the right word, because in a lot of ways it shapes the country. The country reflects California in many ways. So by reading and learning about how things work in California, I think you get a lot of insights into how the rest of the country works as well, though obviously there's many differences from state to state and with the federal government. I just feel that California truly is the most American state, and we need to learn about it even if we don't live here.
Well, and you also, in your introduction, talk about a study that Wallet Hub did. California ranked first in socioeconomic and cultural diversity, as well as eighth in household diversity. The state also topped the nation in linguistic diversity and placed second in diversity among industries. There's also something about the Democrats being more patriotic in blue states than red states. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, they did this survey, and you know, the criteria for that part of it were fairly, maybe a little arbitrary. I mean, the site, like I said in the book, I mean, it rated states on metrics like military enlistment and veterans per capita, voting participation rights, volunteerism, and jury duty participation. And California actually didn't come out that great in the patriotism category, if those are your criteria of patriotism. I think we ranked 36th out of the 50 states.
We want to change that with this podcast series.
We'd love to change that.
We're going to make it. And we're going to change that. Mm-hmm.
But in so many other areas, particularly diversity, both cultural, socioeconomic, household, all those things you just mentioned. You know, I think if there's diversity is really the defining term of America at this point in time. I mean, we're a much more diverse nation in so many ways than we were, you know, really maybe just 20 years ago, but certainly compared to, say, 40, 50 years ago. And we're only getting more and more diverse, more people coming in, more different cultural groups, ethnic groups, different types of industry, different, you know, and hopefully I think we need to become, as a country, more economically diverse. We need a little better distribution of our economic wealth, so that, you know, there's less of a difference between the upper echelon and the middle and lower echelons. Needs to be a little bit evened out. So we need a little more diversity there. But, you know, on the whole, I think that we're an incredibly diverse country. We're only getting more diverse, and there's no state that is already more diverse than California. So if you want to see what diversity looks like, look here.
Look here.
And you'll see what the future of America is going to be, and it already is to some extent.
Well, I think another important point you made in the introduction was about a 2016 book titled Understanding Media and Culture, where the authors wrote, quote, American identity in a mass society is built around certain commonly held beliefs or myths about shared experiences, and these American myths are often disseminated through or reinforced by film. The films that spread and prop up these myths are generated mostly in California. And I wanted to share an experience I had many years ago because to prove that point. I went to the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Canada, for a little while. And when people learned I was California, one of the common responses I got was, when they just learned that, just automatic responses, but you're not blonde. I'm a brunette, and their image of California is that, you know, all the California girls were blonde. I thought,
everyone's a surfer.
Everyone's a surfer, and that was what the films and the culture had shared with the Canadians, even if not the rest of the world.
Yeah, well, it's like, as I was saying earlier, it's like Hollywood is the myth-making machine, but myths are really the basis of any society, not just American society or California society. It's like myths are, you know, myths don't necessarily even have to be false, but there are shared and commonly held beliefs and our shared and commonly held self-image of who we think we are and who we think we're supposed to be. And that is generated almost entirely in California. I mean, that is the center of the Dream Factory, which is the entertainment industry. So it's a very important industry, and I think, economically it's very important, but it's maybe not as important as, say, technology in terms of just pure economics or agriculture. But at the same time, it generates a lot of money, but much more importantly, it generates beliefs, and it generates a self-image of Americans. And that comes out of here. Mm-hmm. So understanding California, I think, is very important to understanding how America sees itself.
Well, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but you also write that the state not only feeds the American cultural zeitgeist, it feeds America literally, with California has been the country's top food-producing state for half a century. Then you also write, California defends the country as well as feeding it. The state has more military bases than any other, with no fewer than 32 such defense installations throughout the state, mostly in Southern California. And then you also say California's contributions is long, but perhaps can best be summed up by the fact that almost 15% of the U.S. economy, U.S. economic production, is generated in California. Now, there are 50 states, so we're not 1/50th, we're 15%.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, suffice to say, California is an extremely important state for that reason. And, the phrase I used, like you said, was the most American state. And all the reasons we've just stated are why I chose to describe it in that fashion. I just think that there's mm-hmm. no state more essential to America, and there's no state that more shapes America's self-image, and there's no state which shapes America's economy more. Obviously, there are other states that do all those things, but California just seems to have it all in one place. And we have to learn how California works in order to really understand not just our daily lives here in California, but how America works also.
And we're not all blonde and surfers, even though we're
not all blonde and surfers.
We all have our own talents. Yeah. Well, I want to break
stereotypes of California.
Yep. I want to break now just so we can get to the prologue, because that's I understand what explanatory journalism is now that you've explained it to me, so I want to get to your prologue. If you are just joining us, my bold guest today is Jonathan Vankin. Jonathan is a senior writer for California Local and is an award-winning journalist whose writing has appeared in such publications as The New York Times Magazine, Wired, Salon, LA Weekly, and many others. And we are discussing his most recent book, How California Works. You may learn more about Jonathan Vankin at jonathanvankin.net and read more about your state and county at californialocal.com. Then click on Monterey County. Subscribe for free for their Monterey County newsletter. You are listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7, 89.5, and 89.7 FM, serving the California Central Coast. Many voices, one station. I'm your host, Jill Cody.
Tonight at 6 p.m. on KSQD, a bonus broadcast of The Babblery, a day before its regular broadcast, Monday at 6 p.m. This week's program explores the intense world of gifted women through the experiences of high IQ women who have raised, taught, and counseled women like themselves. Guests speak about their own lives, raising their children, and being educators, counselors, and researchers, offering insights into the lives of women who, only 100 years ago, were named mental hermaphrodites. Stay tuned tonight. Tune in again Monday at 6 p.m. or listen on demand from ksqd.org. Also available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. And we're speaking with Jonathan Vankin. And Jonathan, later I want to get to Keep, Stop, Starts. But right now, the prologue, there was a great point here. And let me read this. The cable TV, talk radio, the internet, and its social media spawn have created an environment of total, nonstop information. What this new hypermedia-saturated society has not created, however, is an environment of understanding. How do we intellectually and emotionally process this endless waterfall of news? There are no guides. Talk to me about that. Because I think that's profound that, we're saturated with information, but it hasn't built understanding.
No, and I think that's where explanatory journalism comes in, this genre, this relatively recent genre of journalism, which I think is in some ways the most important one. And what people can expect from this book It's explanatory journalism. It's not a book it's a book that's necessarily of the moment. It doesn't, I'm not covering things that happened, this year or about to happen. This is trying to explain to people in hopefully easy to understand and entertaining ways how California works, how the government works, how the law enforcement system works, how the court system works, how every system in California that I was able to cover in this book. And there's more that I didn't cover, obviously, but trying to explain how it works. And I think, I'm fascinated by explanatory journalism. I think it's really interesting. And I did talk about this in the chapter, but I think it's worth mentioning and talking about that, traditionally there's three types of journalism. There's sort of straight news reporting, where a reporter, goes to an event, covers something that's happening. Maybe it's a press conference, or maybe it's a crime scene or a baseball game, and you describe what happened. You give the essential information, the who, what, why, when, where. You put that at the top of the story, and as the story goes on, you get into more granular detail, and that's what's called the inverted pyramid. And basically, in straight news reporting, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to let people know, your readers or your viewers, this is what happened. This baseball game was played, the Dodgers won. I mean, you're just giving them the basic facts. That's one genre. Then you have investigative reporting, which, of course, has always been around, but, it used to be called muckraking. But I think it became very popular in the 70s with Watergate and particularly the movie All the President's Men, really glamorized investigative reporting. And investigative reporting is really where the reporter goes beyond those basic facts that you get from a straight news story, the 5 Ws, and you try to uncover and report facts that aren't necessarily visible or readily apparent to someone who just, is at the same event that you were at and writing about. You're trying to find out, hey, what's going on behind the scenes? Why did this happen? What are the forces shaping it? Is there some sort of scandal here? Is there something else we need to know? I'm going to investigate that. I'm not just showing up and writing down what happened. I'm going to look into it a little deeper.
Right, like providing
a bigger picture.
Providing something new and previously unknown, so you add value.
And that's investigative reporting. And then the third type of traditional journalism is opinion journalism, which is basically anything where, the writer expresses an opinion. You're not supposed to do that in straight news reporting. You're not really supposed to do that even in investigative reporting. But opinion journalism can be anything from a movie review to an editorial, political column. Sports writers usually have a little more leeway to express their opinions in their news stories, but it's basically the same idea that, opinion journalism is, as an implied, to express your opinion about, not just reporting that Kamala Harris gave this speech. I'm giving my opinion that it was a great speech, and this is going to help her win, something like that.
Right.
That's opinion journalism. Explanatory journalism, to me, though, it's sort of a hybrid of all of them, and maybe sometimes it's none of them. You can incorporate elements of straight news reporting, investigation, opinion. They all come together, and what we're trying to do in these explanatory pieces is provide some sort of context, some sort of deeper understanding, and that may be providing facts that people don't know, or it may just be covering things that aren't necessarily covered and trying to show people why something is happening, what it means, and helping them get a better understanding of it. Because as I said in the early part of that chapter that you read, I think that's really what's missing from our information overload society now is any sense of understanding. So, just to give one example off the top of my head, you hear a lot today about, in the presidential campaign about tariffs. Donald Trump wants to put all these tariffs on everything. And he claims it won't affect anything. It won't affect prices. It won't affect, it's not a tax, whatever. Democrats are saying the opposite. This is a tax. It's going to cause inflation. But what are tariffs? What does that mean? I don't think everybody knows what a tariff specifically is. What does it do? Who really does pay it? So if I were to write an explanatory piece about tariffs, I wouldn't necessarily take the side of one or the other. I would just try to show what it really is, where they come from, why we have them, and what they actually do.
And that they're usually passed down to the consumer.
Well, that's the fact.
Yeah.
That's the truth. So that would be part of the explanatory piece. And, hopefully people would read that and get a better understanding of what that means and make them better able to judge what the candidates are saying and what the claims they're making are, whether they're true or false, and what it will mean. If we have more tariffs, if we have fewer. Anyway, that's just one example that I just reeled off the top of my head. But that's the type of thing we're trying to do in explanatory journalism. And really, this genre has only been around as a genre really since the 80s. I think the Pulitzer Prize Committee added it as a category in
1985.
I think.
Yeah, you said 85.
85.
Right.
Yes, and that's when the first Pulitzer Prize was awarded for explanatory journalism.
I didn't even know it was that old. That's something that I learned, that the Pulitzer Prize Committee created that category in 1985.
Yeah, and it's an important category, I think. So I wanted to have this as sort of the prologue to the book to let people know what type of thing they're going to be reading. Like, this is what you're going to get when you read this. If you read, I just flipping open the book here, I have a chapter called Natural Gas and the Future of California. Well, I'm trying to explain in that chapter, well, what is natural gas? Where does it come from? What does it mean to the California economy? What does it mean in our daily lives? How much of it do we use? Should we be using it? I mean, those are the types of things I'm trying to get into, just trying to explain the topic as best I can so that people can have a better understanding of it. So that's really what that whole prologue is about. It's just trying to give you an introduction to that type of journalism. So I think it's one that people aren't as familiar with as the other three that I listed.
Right. And one thing that I wanted to sort of dovetail on is that understanding explanatory journalism, understanding truthful explanatory journalism, because there's been explanatory journalism on critical race theory, CRT, or DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They've done explanatory journalism that is the opposite of what it really is. It's untruthful. So that is the difference, again, when we talk about truth, that we're looking for truthful explanatory journalism, because wouldn't you call those that write and change the definition of critical race theory, which was always taught in law school about the entire system of how race has impacted our country, versus people thinking it's something that it shouldn't be taught in elementary school, and it never was. Yeah. But they write it as if it's a threat to that.
I know. Well, I think there you're getting into the difference between explanatory journalism or journalism in general and propaganda.
Yes.
And I think a lot of what you're describing in those so-called explanatory pieces about DEI and that sort of thing, it's just propaganda. I mean, explanatory journalism, like all journalism, should be factually accurate. I mean, to me, if journalism isn't factually accurate, within reason, obviously everybody makes mistakes,
right,
and no journalist is perfect, but there are bad faith actors, as they say, out there, and there's a lot of them in the media these days, particularly in certain media outlets, who are more interested in propaganda, and they're not working from actual facts. So that's really the basis of all journalism to me. It's like you have to be working from documented facts as best as you possibly can. So, I always try to rely on reliable sources, academic publications, major media reports that check out against other major media reports, government publications, all these things that are nonpartisan and are really just about putting facts out to the public. I mean, that's one of the functions of our government, both the state government and the federal government, that I think people aren't aware of, is like how much of it is devoted to researching and disseminating factual information. There's so much of it out there, and I think people don't, in general, take advantage of it. So I'm hoping maybe, my book is a bit of a Reader's Digest for a lot of information that has been compiled by the government. And when I say the government, I mean, I'm not talking about the partisan government. I'm talking about using the resources and the funding available to the government to do real, in-depth research on whether it's, job creation or energy use or anything like that.
Right, what the departments are doing within that local, county, state government. Now, we have about 1 minute to talk about some keep, stop, starts. And we just finished all the preambles of your book. And so one thing I want to encourage people as a start is to go to the California local website and start subscribing to get the Monterey County news that is presented there every Monday. Do you have any other keep, stop, starts that are within these 4 preamble chapters?
What do you mean by keep, stop, start?
Well, keep doing, stop doing, and start doing.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, I would say keep reading my book.
Right, which we will be.
Keep buying the book, start reading it. But beyond that, yeah, I think what people should be doing is they should keep looking. You hear this phrase, do your own research all the time. You got to do your own real research. That doesn't mean just watching a YouTube video. It means researching things, reading sources that you find reliable, checking them against other sources, and just try to learn as much as you can about how your government and your state works. And that's really the purpose of this book, is to inform people. And again, as I said at the very top, knowledge is power. And the more we know, the more we're able to act on our knowledge and our information, and the more we're able to change things. So I would say keep on getting involved, keep on being a citizen or citizening, if we're going to use it as a verb.
Right.
And don't stop.
Right. And we're going to be having you back, and we'll start with your first part that has 11 chapters on November 17th. So, Jonathan, thank you for being our bold and impressive guest today. It's so good to have you on the show. You have written a brilliant book.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And thank you for being willing to do several more shows so we can come up with a series that people can listen to and learn more about the state of California. We're living our lives here, folks. We should know what state we're living it within. What's up next on Be Bold America? On September 8th, we'll be discussing the most dangerous document ever written, Project 2025, The Dismantling of Our Freedoms. We will be honored to have our bold guest back on the program, Dr. John Roth, to discuss what the hidden ideologic plans are to dismantle America. Dr. Roth is the author of Warnings, The Holocaust, Ukraine, and Endangered American Democracy. Dr. Roth is the Edward J. Sexton Professor of Emeritus of Philosophy at Claremont McKenna College, who's been studying for months the Mandate for Leadership Project 2025. He'll be warning us again with a deeper look at key ideological strategies to create an authoritarian state. That's with a capital S in America. Please join us on September 8th at 5 p.m. for the most dangerous document ever written. As a reminder, Be Bold America is available as a podcast. Now you may listen to the show anytime for free by subscribing through your favorite podcast platform. Also, you may reach me anytime at info@ksqd.org. I want to give a special thank you to our talented Be Bold America's program engineer, Eliza James, and to our station's tireless program director, Howard Feldstein. You are listening to KSQD Santa Cruz. Many voices, one station. Listen worldwide online at ksqd.org website. Stay tuned for the Babblery with Suki Wessling. Remember our motto, let your smile change the world. Don't let the world change your smile. And be bold. My name is Jill Cody, and thank you for listening to Be Bold America. Until next time, keep, stop, start.